Hey guys, continuing Iamblichus' exhortation to philosophy text, chapter 9. We're coming closer towards the end of the chapter now. So in this part, Iamblichus says, why has nature created humans? In the previous chapter, remember, we looked at how nature creates things. And it was shown that if nature creates something, it is for the sake of nature. So it serves a purpose. And that purpose is where that thing finds its end. And the same thing is with art. If art creates something, or science creates something, again it's for its purpose, for the purpose of that science. And there the thing finds its end. In this chapter, in this part of the chapter, Iamblichus says, look at a knife. The purpose of knife is to cut. So when the knife cuts, there it found its end, and it is serving its purpose. So in a way we can think about the art that creates knives. It creates a knife, and that knife fulfills the purpose of that art, which is to cut. Okay, so here Iamblichus says, when Pythagoras and Anaxagoras were asked, why were humans created, for what purpose? What was the answer given by those two sages, essentially? He said Pythagoras said that man was created to contemplate the celestial sphere. And Anaxagoras said that humans were created to contemplate the heavenly sphere and its inhabitants. So this is what Iamblichus says. So now, as is usual, we start to contemplate. So now I'm going to give my interpretation and just bounce some ideas around that are coming from me, not from the text, around this. And the same in comments, the way you interpret this and the way you can add to it, write in comments to this video so everyone can benefit. So here are the two key things that I want to focus on. Where's my pen? Is there two main parts. To contemplation, heavenly or celestial sphere, and its inhabitants. 3 parts. Contemplation, as we know from the previous videos, from the previous chapters of this text, is what happens when wisdom is activated. What happens within wisdom, essentially. Contemplation is when, according to Iamblichus, and I said this in the previous videos, Iamblichus says contemplation is when we're deciding to choose between one of two things. And we're deciding to choose which of the two things is better. And the way to do this is to look at the cause. Because the cause is greater than the effects it causes. It's higher. Hence the power of philosophy. We're constantly trying to figure out what is the best thing. What is the good? And we're climbing higher, 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 higher up in the causes. So here we have the contemplation element. So immediately this tells us the nature of a human is to contemplate, which means, from the previous chapters, is to be able to choose which is the better of the two. But to be able to choose which is the better, we need to know what better is. What is good? What is that thing we call good? We need to know what that is. So essential, it becomes essential that we study philosophy. We study what is the nature of good. You see how it works? Otherwise we cannot contemplate. This is how I understand it. Again, this is not what Iamblichus says in this chapter. This is taking it all together from this text. So once again, to contemplate, according to Iamblichus from previous chapters, is to choose the better of the two things. But, as I understand it, to be able to choose the better, we need to know what exactly is better, what is good. And this is exactly what philosophy deals with. We know from philosophy, and from this text at least, that that which is better will be more ordered, there'll be more order and harmony in it, compared to disharmony and disorder. So whichever has more order, has more harmony, and whichever is the cause, will be better than that which is the effect. It will be greater. Because as Iamblichus says in the previous chapter, there's fewer causes and there's many more effects. And we see this in the way the structure of reality is created, even on the physical level. Yeah. So this is the first element. So both Pythagoras and Anaxagoras say that our job as humans is to contemplate. And what do we contemplate? We contemplate the celestial sphere and the heavenly sphere. So what does this tell us? This tells us that we need to be able to activate our wisdom and start to think about the causes of the heavenly sphere and its inhabitants. And what are the inhabitants of the heavenly sphere? First of all, by heavenly sphere, I understand, just from very basic, my very basic understanding of this level of Platonism, there are two things. On one level, it's the ideas, so to say, which is the level of the intellect of the heavenly sphere. And the next level, I guess, or maybe that is the same level, I don't know yet, would be gods. So when Anaxagoras says to contemplate the heavenly sphere and its inhabitants, I believe he doesn't just mean gods. I believe he means other things. But these things are going to become very complex, so we'll stay out of it for now. For now, the key thing that I understand from this is that we need to contemplate the higher truths, the higher reality, the celestial sphere, the causality. But we remember from the previous chapters that in order to be able to contemplate, we must be virtuous and we must develop self-control. This frees up our mind, frees up our soul to be able to contemplate higher truths. Otherwise, our soul is too bound to the body if we do not develop self-control over the impulses and desires of this alien animal, as Iamblichus calls them, this alien. If we do not develop the self-control over this beast, he calls him the beast as well, then our soul will not rise higher to contemplate the higher truths. But essentially, this is what he says is the purpose of a human being. And in that, the human being will find its end. And this is very beautiful what happens now. If we do this, and if we look at how Platonism develops later on, then by doing this, we are not just remotely contemplating things, but we're starting to create reality and change reality and fulfill the nature's process of creation. And we do not see this yet in this text. We see this much later on in Proclus's work and so forth, where the process of creation and how the human soul works in that process, when that is explained in more detail. That basically by contemplating the highest spheres, we're starting to create this reality and fill it with goodness. It is really fascinating. And Iamblichus hints at this in this text by saying that wisdom does not just think about things, it's not just theoretical, but it's a practical thing. It performs things within itself. He said this in the previous chapters. So Iamblichus is already hinting that by contemplating things on the level of wisdom, we're not just thinking about something, even though it's not really thought, it's more like intuitions. But these intuitions have a very practical, kind of like productive nature. They're generating things, so to say. That's how I understood it. And so we see, again, the cycle is hinted at. Cycles which later become much more explanatory, and we'll be talking in much more depth when we talk about Proclus, at least, how the human soul works in a cycle. But it works in a cycle if it fulfills its purpose, which is this. Then it serves nature. And we do not mean here physical nature, as I understand it, not the animal nature, but nature on a bigger level, the spiritual nature as well. So by serving the spiritual nature, by serving our soul, we're essentially not only serving the soul, we're evolving our soul, but we're bringing more light into the physical body as well, and more goodness, and into the physical world of generation. And thus we're influencing not just our soul, but the actual reality, the physical reality, by bringing light into it. And we see this and bringing the good, God, or whatever you want to call it, from above, right into this physical reality, through us, through this body, and through our actions, through our words, kind of becoming a channel for it. And thus we're helping nature in the whole generation of the process, but in a very good way now. And we see this later on, much more detailed those explanations become. Not in this text, again, it will be in the other texts. I hope I will get to them later. So that's it for this chapter. I'm going to meditate now for 15 seconds, and YouTube will show a video. Click on it, and also write in the description how you understand this, and what ideas, what contemplations it springs in you. Write in the comment section. This will be very useful. I will read it, others will read it. It will help us all to develop ourselves. And correct me if I'm wrong. That's also a very good idea, because I'm just learning these things.